Good evening, everybody. Scott Stevens here on a Friday night where once again, as we move into the weekend, we find ourselves watching Louisiana and folks along the Gulf Coast tightly focused on where Laura came ashore back towards the end of August. They haven't even cleaned up from that yet. Some of the concerns were that there was still so much debris lying around that it was going to become a problem once these winds, these 100-plus mile an hour winds, at least sustained about 100, little weaker elsewhere, but the strongest gusts as measured by recon at about 105. So that's where it stands as we move on through. But it's moving ashore as we speak, and the videos are kind of coming in. There's still some internet up, so that's happening. But this no more than about 2 hours old. As you can see, the visibility is low. The trees already freshly stripped or stripped from earlier storms. They're just not in a position to be able to endure this once again. As in the art of warfare, the beach was softened 2 weeks ago, and now we're just ripping it up once again. So those kind of winds, those kind of rains are common through southwest Louisiana. Shock Iceland's most active volcano that grounded 900 passenger flights back in 2011 looks like it's getting ready to erupt once again. That will be something we will watch, because every volcanic eruption, every ejection of cubic miles, if it gets to be that large of one, of the sulfur dioxide of these particles into the air, is just additional sunlight reflected from the sun. That energy does not get to come into Earth, and in doing so, we just continue to draw that veil around this planet with the sun already as weak as it's been in quite some time. But an active Thanksgiving weekend coming up across the province in the far northwest. Strong winds to the south, maybe nothing. What we're dealing with is Manitoba, and we just have a situation where some snow is headed in that direction, and they'll be dealing with this. So a big wound-up storm with some rain and snows out ahead of it. So this is something that Manitoba is going to be contending with through the weekend, October 11, that being Sunday morning for those folks in that middle Canadian province. It's actually where my mom is from, is Manitoba. Winnipeg in particular. All right, the days of cold weather forecast for large parts of Europe, including the UK, France, Italy, and the Balkans. The cold period starts this weekend, and that extends through mid-October. Essentially, we could say it's up for a week. That would be the easier way of saying this. So, we have this oscillation where we've gone from hot, and you can see even on this graphic, let's see how that loads up, if we get a bunch in here, or if there's the deep low across Europe, and of course the temperature anomalies. But anytime you have that kind of a sharp low on either side of it, you've got a ridge. The jet stream would love to run very quickly parallel, but once you start to kink it, that just allows a ridge to develop on either side. And those ridges are always dynamic. They're all moving in one form or another. But this is going to hang around for 5, 6, 7 days and really begin to dump some chilly air in that direction. All right, where are we fire-wise as we move into the weekend? We're still at National Preparedness Level 4. Wildland firefighters continue to reach their suppression goals with international and military assistance. Still, with 73 large fires that have burned over 4 million acres, we've got 4 new ones, 2 contained, and we will probably, before the end of the day, before the end of this 9th of October, cross the 8 million acres burned in the contiguous or in the United States altogether. Some of that, a large part of that, due to the drought conditions that are in place out west. Now, as we look at see how the drought monitor, which was issued yesterday, it comes out on Thursday mornings, compared to what was shared with us yesterday from the center in Lincoln, Nebraska, to where we were a month ago. The yellow is where we've seen at least one category of drought degradation. As we get into oranges, deeper oranges, like in the Star Valley, south of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, we've had at least 3 categories of degradation. Right over here is your scale. That's also happened in the northern part of the Adirondacks, where upstate New York has also seen a bit of a degradation, where we have seen improvement across Iowa, northern Illinois, and then west of the hill country in Texas as we get out, I believe it's the Pecos Plateau, has seen some improvement. Otherwise, those areas that have seen improvement are just very, very minor. As we look out, just as a gross comparison over the next couple of days, we're seeing the threat, the welcome signs of rain as we get into the reds and the brighter purples down in here, like with what Delta is doing in Louisiana. It looks like the Northwest and those northern Rocky Mountains are going to get some precip out over the next 60 days. Not so much for California, as the record heat from today from eastern plains of New Mexico, high plains of Texas into southern Colorado, and then angling out ahead of a cool front, out ahead of that cooler Pacific air that has made its way through the northern Rockies. And then ahead of that, we've got this little scoot of very mild air. All the way up to Minneapolis, St. Paul. 86 was the forecast today. That would have tied the record set back in 1938 with their period of record going back to 1872. Goodland, Kansas at 91. Eau Claire, Wisconsin at 82. Dodge City at 91. Colorado Springs at 84. Just outside of Amarillo at 95. There's Alamos at 76. That's my home location. And then Aberdeen, South Dakota at 85 degrees. You get familiar enough with these identifiers, and you're easy to see where people's luggage are coming in when you're standing at the carousel wondering, I wonder when they're going to pick up that bag. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen Dutch's channel yet, Gregory. Not just yet. He's an interesting character, and coming from my background, I would interpret a lot of the data he shares with folks in a different way. A very different way. But I'll go have a look if you want to throw up a link. All right, unusually intense record storms knocking power out to over 200,000 customers in New York's Capital District, Albany, Schenectady, Niskayuna, Rensselaer, over to Troy, all the way, not quite all the way over to the Berkshires and Western Mass. But what kind of surprised me about this was just how green the trees still were, even though we've been watching some of the colors change in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and into Massachusetts, but still how green they are, that they're still holding on to that kind of foliage. It's going to change quickly, though, now as we've turned much, much cooler. High temperatures for yesterday, the warmest in the nation, Octillo Wells, California at 104, and then back to the Northeast. 12 degrees to begin the day at Mount Washington, New Hampshire. It'll be the Northeast. It'll be chilly once again. A little more clouds, a little more stirring or mixing in the atmosphere, allowing the Northwest to not be quite that chilly. There's Delta. There's those 105-mile-an-hour winds as it begins to press ashore. And the rainfall forecast still exceeding 8+ inches. The good news is Delta is moving north-northeast at a fairly good clip for these guys, so that's going to take it quickly into northern Louisiana and will be out of the state 16, 17, 18 hours tops, and it'll be moving on into the up the Mississippi Valley and then arcing across at Tennessee. That's why we see those elevated storm totals there. There's the broader picture with the plume of mid and high level moisture arcing out ahead of it. A lot of dry air coming in as a weak trough and some shear coming in, and that also helping disturb the path, disturb its further development. So that's the good news. To the northwest, plenty of clouds coming through. And then this is where we're going to look in just a moment, where there are just a lot of trails in those Arizona skies this morning. Animate this, and the thunderstorm, the convective tops are almost virtually all ashore now, with the strong north and northeast winds behind this. But Delta is ashore, and much of the waters here just off the coastal areas were at best 83 degrees, and in many cases somewhat cooler than that. Again, we're pushing into the middle part of October, and we've had a few storms there to have kind of churned the waters for a bit, and that has upwelled some cooler conditions. All right, this is what I wanted to do right here at that Sunrise Terminator. And look at these trails. You could see them all, boom, 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 boom. And they just accentuate the cloud cover. And then there's other things that they do. Let's highlight this area right in through here. And we'll animate this and notice how that moves in a very different pattern. It's kind of held back. It's like it's run into some friction. And usually when you get higher in elevation, the wind speeds are just stronger. But this is what trails are very good at, is delineating when, how can I say this? If we were to take a sheet of graph paper and then run a straight line across that, and what if that sheet of graph paper were then able to sit on a stream or a creek or something that was undulating or moving. And then you would see those cubes that would denote where the straight lines, the cross lines had been written down or imprinted upon that moving body of atmosphere, that moving body of water. And then that's what these trails are very, very good at, is then showing those, Honeywell in particular is the company that runs this, what the atmosphere is doing. And if you're going to play with it, segment by segment by segment, then you need to have that data, that input. And there was a dearth of information when we ended up with COVID, and a lot of the commercial flights not out there, not operating. They had to bring up little business jets, and so we saw these little smaller business planes kind of taking up the slack in that regard. There's the frost that was out west, the cooler temperatures in the 30s, also up in Quebec. We'll refresh this and bring us to midday readings. There's the warmth, these places in the 90s, and then 80s out of this little sliver out ahead of the cool front is where we were seeing those record temperatures today. Again, once we cross 0Z, the end of the meteorological day, which comes up in about 45 minutes, we'll be able to see those records to see where that is. I can see the sun coming in here. I should have drawn the curtains and turned on the lights. But where we are, look at some of these. These are some of the rainfall totals. This courtesy Weather Underground and the cooperative effort of a lot of amateur weather observers connecting their stations, their Davises, their AccuWeathers, their AccuRights, their network of commercial, not commercial grade gear, that would be an overstep, consumer grade equipment, bringing us data during these kind of storms, and I greatly appreciate those guys that do that. Now let's refresh this, and I kind of want to zoom in, see if we can't get a little greater granulation, 7 inches, 4 inches. That's a big one. And then we don't know who does and who does not have power, because once the grid goes down, then the Wi-Fi in the house that then communicates this data back out to the servers, the IBM servers, that disappears, and so we lose access to that data once the power goes down, unless they just happen to be on UPSs. But even then, you've got to have it's all got to be working. That's just the beauty and then the curse of the internet. So where dew points are fairly high, confined to the south, although we've got some nice south winds beginning to transport this moisture farther to the north, and there's the boundary of the heat. Up here, as we move into Minnesota and the far northwest part of the state, we've got low 60s versus low 80s, dew points in the 50s versus dew points in the lower 40s. So very clear to see that front. It's like Minneapolis, you're going out for the night. It's a great night. Your short sleeves or just a light long sleeve jacket. It's still breezy, but by the time you're done with dinner, the time you're going out, if you go out, if you can go out, some states you can't, the seasons will have certainly changed behind it. There's our animation as we look at the eye wall right in through here. The southern semicircle of Delta is gone. We've only got the north one left as it presses ashore, and of course the green boxes dealing with the flooding outlook, and then the rains headed into the Seattle area as they're anxiously awaiting, although if we go to the drought monitor, this part of the northwest from about Portland west and then northward and just east of Bellingham, they're just the drought is gone from there. We've had enough rains this fall. All right, two things we got to look at. The models have kind of gone back and forth on this, where I roll this forward, this big ridge that's been in place in the west kind of weakens out, but what happens is some energy kind of definitely rolls back in from the north. I'll just animate this. Watch this low, because this becomes the pivot point of the weather throughout a good chunk of North America. It all centers around this low that forms over Montana across Manitoba and into Ontario, and it holds for about 10 days. Another chunk of reinforcing energy comes back in from Greenland and resets that pattern. And when you get a strong northerly flow across the jet stream off to the north, that can throw a lot of cold air, especially this kind of kink right through there. It throws that cold air into the Rockies, deep into the plains, and that it looks like we've got another slug of northerly flow. And what this does, here's our rains, here's Delta. Delta weakens out. It just loses almost its entire... Thank you, sun. Did you really have to come out just now? I was enjoying the clouds. Its identity is gone in 48 hours. But right in through here, we'll watch this guy come out. It's a week away. It's a week away, but it begins to then plunge southbound. The models last night, the 0Z1 ran this, and I'm like, oh, that looks like an event. And then the 6Z didn't have it, and then the 12Z didn't have it. Now we're back here at the noon model run, the 18Z, and it is grabbing onto the solution again of a very cold high pressure sitting next to Tuesday noon, Tuesday the 18th. Tuesday the 20th at 18Z. So it's still a distance out, but this is something we're going to watch out for. There's a lot of farmers through Canada, through the Northern Plains states, into the Great Lakes states that are not ready to deal with this kind of a cold. We're not ready. Michigan, we have less than 10% of the corn harvest in. And there are some indications of several days of lake effect snows beginning next weekend. And the farmers are going to either have to endure it or pull it in early or harvest it now and then dry it in the bins. So we've got some challenging conditions and a lot of cold air locked up there for central and eastern Canada as well. All that cold has got to come from the north across Canada and then enter into the States. So this is going to be kind of a treacherous or a little tenuous situation, much like last October, where the snows came early, the rains were cold, and it impacted harvest. So this is something we'll watch over the next 10 days very, very keenly, considering the crop failures that we've had in China, in Nigeria, in India, parts of Vietnam, Southern America, South America, Argentina, and Uruguay in particular. So we've got some weaknesses within the supply chain, and an early frost, an early cold, puts an end to the maturing process. We just freeze the crops in the field, and we have to then determine how that impacts the quality of the kernels, whether it's corn, whether it's soybeans, whether it's sorghum, whether it's potatoes in the ground that a frost will kill, and not even kill, it just ruins their ability, because then the cells explode, and then it turns into, growing up in Idaho, a frozen potato is a disaster if it gets stuck in with the other bins. So that's kind of it for the day. Friday, a lot of good things happening. Gregory's still curious about Dutch. I'd love to have a talk with him, because we tend to interpret things very, very differently. He sees steam vents and I see thunderstorms. So there's I've been aware of him for probably the better part of 10 years. He's got a great presentation. But I interpret the data very, very different way. And especially directed energy weapons. We're stitching together. We have so many satellites that do polar orbits, and we're stitching data together. We're from a point of view, and the planet is tilting or moving, and so we can have all kinds of data processing artifacts that look like something that it isn't. And it shows up on Google and all kinds of things that may or may not be, but I tend to say they're not, especially when they're seen from a technological first-person view from the sky. That's a whole different ballgame. But when you're interpreting the data that a satellite has achieved, and then there's all kinds of mapping routines, meaning we're back to a grid of paper. You lay that grid of paper on a round ball and look at it at an angle, and also a moving angle, and you can really create some funny looking patterns. All right, I'm going to leave it right there for the day, and we'll come back on Monday for another perspective. And I got a topic. I think we're going to talk about cloning. It appears the technology is nearly there to where we can be, if we aren't already, cloning human beings. We've been doing it with plants. We've been doing it for farm animals. So why not go there with the human being? And then it really opens up a big spiritual can of worms as to what then inhabits that vehicle that has been manufactured. And that is the fascinating part for me, is what energy gets permission, or does it force its way into a body? And that's a whole nother discussion. I think we'll end up on the world stage as AI and these combination bio computer robot kind of hybrids begin to enter the world stage. Whether they've already been here and other civilizations have got this baby perfected, which is my opinion, but it's something I'll talk about on another perspective at 6 o'clock on Monday. We'll catch you then. In the meanwhile, if you're in Louisiana, God bless you, but elsewhere, enjoy the fall weekend. Have a great weekend and keep looking up.